Welcome to the Instinctive Influencers Podcast, a show where influence becomes one of your tools for success. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Weber and Ed Haley.
Hi, I'm Brian,
And I am Ed.
and this is the Instinctive Influencers Podcast.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. We've decided to kind of take a route that we've been talking about for a while, man. We're gonna cover a book that we've said we were gonna do for a while now. But before we get into that, man, how are things?
Things are good. Restrictions are getting lifted. Things are improving. And of course, as we record this today, it's a special day. Today is the 76th anniversary of D-Day and the Normandy landing. So I've been watching they're doing some commemorative ceremonies, and because of COVID, they're just doing like live streams of them and stuff. So I've been trying to catch some of the ceremonies here and there. There's a D-Day live site, but unfortunately, like everything's pretty much in French writing wise, but you can still watch the videos. The videos are fine. So I've been kind of checking in on D-Day live on Facebook and watching some of the ceremonies. A year ago, I was there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's on the 75th anniversary. Now it's the 76th anniversary.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, our World War II D-Day soldiers, they're not getting any younger. Put it that way, man. And it's good to kind of hear their history and hear what their stories and to try to. That's why, and that's why I like to like Band of Brothers and stuff, man. I loved that series because of how they not only did they tell the story of Easy Company, but they also were getting interviews from those individuals who many of which are no longer alive. So
yeah, there's not there's not many, and that is the best part of is listening to the stories. So and then last year when we went, like that was a big thing. Like if you could catch veterans everywhere, and they would just be more than happy to share their stories, but it's also kind of ironic, Brian. The book we're going to talk about today happened or was written and published before D-Day, like years before D-Day.
This book is 83 years old.
Wow.
83 and it's still considered a top seller. Like right now on Amazon, I think it's number 11 on Amazon as their top seller right now. 30 million copies worldwide have been sold, and 250 per year are being sold every year. Now, when this book first came out, Ed, I did a little research on it. When this book first came out, within the first 3 months in 1937, 250 copies were sold. And they had gone through 7, or it's either 7 or 11. And then there's the store 7-Eleven. But there's either 7 or 11 edition or printings went through, So like you have like first edition, 7th printing, that type of thing. Yeah, that's like they didn't expect the abundant amount of people to buy it. One of the fun facts about it also is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is, he's known for the business industry and making a ton of money off of things. He actually went to the course that was this book was developed off of when he was 20 years old.
Right.
And he still keeps the certificate hanging up in his office. Yeah. Another fact.
Those courses are actually you can go on YouTube, and some of those courses are actually on there. Some of the material is on YouTube that you can watch. There's some innovative versions of the book on there too that are kind of funny. I was doing my research, I looked through some of those things. So
and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, it's obviously it stood the test of time. Now there's some references to some gangsters and shootouts and stuff in the book that I was like, oh man, this must be from the 30s, but
no, exactly, man. Yeah.
And then
so I guess we should tell everybody what we're talking about, huh?
No, why? Go ahead.
Nah, forget them. They could guess, right?
Yeah, they may know already.
All right, so what we're doing is we're going to do a 3-part series on a book. And if you're a listener and you've been listening for a while, sometimes we do books and we go over some of the topics on the books. We don't get too in depth in the book, but we go over the major points and then discuss it. And this 3-part series is going to be over Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And Ed, right off the bat, it's funny. We did Science of Likability probably a year ago or so, maybe a little bit. Yeah, about that.
Ish.
And with Science of Likability, I had read that book before I'd gone through all the fundamentals of and the information for how to win friends and influence people. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, this is just like Science of Likability. So I'm kind of wondering if the author of Science of Likability kind of ripped off this book a little bit. I don't know. I'm not going to say that because I like the information, but I thought it was crazy.
Well, there's a reason this book is still, in print all these years later. I watched one of the videos I watched. It was from 2014, so obviously it's changed. But the host of the video, she said that this book at that time was number 2 on the all-time bestseller list. Do you know what book would be number 1?
Oh, this is number 2. Number 1, the Bible?
Yes, which is also, I've also read, very difficult to actually track because it's given so much. But yeah, so in 2000, so just 6 years. I mean, it's 6 years, but 6 years ago. Now try to look today, and there's a lot of Harry Potters in there in between it and the Bible now. So I guess the Harry Potter series and stuff kind of gave the old nudge over the years. But
yeah,
but it's interesting. Like so,
it is. It's what I find interesting about it is how it's still, people don't realize, it's almost like history repeats itself, and people don't realize how much all this information plays total effect to today and today's world and today's society and how things are going, even in some of the chaos that's going on right now. I think if people would kind of follow these tips that we're going to talk about, we might not see the issues we see so much, or we wouldn't hear about the stories of toxic leadership that we hear about, or, just all the different things. So I find it ironic. How about that?
Yeah, no, and that's why I say. So the other thing that I thought was kind of funny is, for us, we read a lot of military books, and then these are military principles and stuff. Like one of the future shows, General Patton's Principles for Leadership.
Yes,
and we try to take military principles and make them make sense to a civilian sector. And here, I found myself as I read the book doing the opposite, like taking Dale Carnegie's stuff and saying, oh, I could use this. Like,
yeah,
I could absolutely use this in the military side to have some influence over people. So it's kind of weird. This book is very unique to us. And I think the other thing is, I mean, part of our show title is right in the title of the book. How did we not do this book like episode 2? I have no idea. And we never talked about it until way later.
Yeah.
But it's just weird. Like, oh, we want our show is about spreading your influence and enriching how you influence people and the people you work with and work around. And we didn't go with the this book, but here we are today.
It was going to happen eventually, my friend. Eventually. Well, so Ed, I wanted to before we get into the topics of this episode, part 1, which we're going to go over the fundamental techniques in handling people, and then also 6 ways to make people like you. But in the book, I have a hard copy right here with me. And in this book, it talks about, it's basically a list of 9 things in order to get the most out of this book. And these 9 things are as such. 1, develop a deep driving desire to master the principles of human relations. See, that to me, that's just that idea of, hey, I know I'm going to make change. Let's make change, right?
Yeah, interpersonal tact. That's all it is.
Exactly. All right. So number 2, read each chapter twice before going on to the next one. And you and I have talked about this before. When we read things, I know and you're the same way. Sometimes I'll read something and I'll grasp it, but I want to truly comprehend it. So I go back and I reread it to pull out key points that I maybe didn't understand before and to understand.
Yeah, now thanks to the miracle that is Audible, I tend to read it and then listen to it and then compare and kind of like, oh, okay, I got a little more out of it now after reading it and listening to it. But
yeah.
And is if you listen to it, is that reading it still? I don't know how this works. Like, I'm not sure about this. So really, you are reading it twice, but just one of them you're listening. I don't know. So the 2 read thing is confusing me with Audible.
So well, in Audible, let me tell you, I think it's an amazing thing. Actually, I was listening to this also on Audible, just like you were, and I'm going to continue listening to it. But what you just said about doing both. So there were 2 books that I was reading it while I was listening to it, like actually going through it with. So I'm listening to it and I'm looking at the words as the person's reading it to me, and I was highlighting things, and I'd stop and pause it. The 2 books were Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, and then there's another one that I've kind of found an interest in. It's called Inside Delta Force. It was written by one of the initial members.
Amazing book, brother. That is such a good book. I love that book. And that book is also the basis for the television show The Unit from the early 2000s. Well, love that book.
Wow, you really get excited about that. Maybe we should talk about that book instead.
So that was a deployment read, man. That was one of my books, like maybe my second or third deployment that I read.
Yeah.
And then I came back and watched The Unit, but it was so well written. And then there's another one that goes to it that's kind of the same lines. It's called Men in Green Faces, and it's about the SEALs, early development of the SEALs in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Amazing book. Highly recommend if you enjoyed Inside Delta Force.
I'm loving Inside Delta Force, and my favorite part is I like to listen to it also when I'm in my truck. So if I'm driving to work, because I feel like I'm just kind of like I'm learning about something new, but I'm getting a story with the initial start of all this, and the author. I love the detail. The detail of that book. It's perfect because it's almost like you can smell the smells. You can feel the feelings he's got, all the different things that are going on. So, yeah, great book. But I find myself doing both at the same time, and it's helped me kind of comprehend a little bit better, just in case I'm not understanding. Kind of sounds weird, but we got to continue on here, Ed.
All right.
In order to get most out of this book, number 3 is, as you read, stop frequently to ask yourself how you can apply each suggestion. That's a key thing in pretty much any how-to books that I get into or anything. I like to say, okay, is this how this? Okay, I got this. Yeah. Number 4, underscore each important idea. So he's saying, hey, man, write in this book, take and underline what you think is important. Yeah, and that way you can come back to it if you need to, because you're not going to remember everything that's, it's just like, I don't remember every single thing we did and talked about in episode 7, right? But I can go back, I can look at the show notes that are on the podcast itself. I can go back and listen to it, and, I'll find those things. And then the next one, number 5, review this book each month. So it's kind of one of those things. Once you've kind of gone through the book, maybe you go back and you thumb through those highlights that you found. Number 6, apply these principles at every opportunity. Use this volume as a working handbook to help you solve your daily problems. Now, that I love. I love the idea, he's basically saying when you feel the opportunity. So when you're noticing certain things, and we'll get into those certain things later on, but when you're noticing these things, think about what was said and to try to apply it. I'm not saying make an experiment out of things, but in a sense, if you don't try it, you'll never know. So number 7, make a lively game out of your learning by offering some friend a dime or a dollar every time he or she catches you violating one of these principles. Oh my goodness. That
this is when a dime really went somewhere.
You know what I mean? Like a dime or, yeah. It should be like $1 or $5 or whatever, now. But yeah, that's actually back then, though, a dime went a long ways.
Yeah, a long way back then. But it's just funny. And this is what we were talking about when we were talking about, like, some of the things in it have not quite stood up to the test of time, but it's still a great book. But it's just, that was funny to me.
Yeah. Number 8, check up each week on the progress you are making. Ask yourself what mistakes you have made, what improvement, what lessons you have learned for the future. Ed, what does that sound like to you?
Brian, that sounds like an episode that we did, a after action review, my friend.
That is exactly what it is, my man. And the last one, number 9, keep notes in the back of this book showing how and when you have applied these principles. So basically, it's kind of like, hey, keep a diary, kind of let us know, kind of to keep track of what you did. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I thought it was great to kind of give the idea of like how people should, utilize this book in a sense to get the most out of it. But I think we need to jump right into this, Ed.
All right.
And do you want to start us off with the fundamental techniques in handling people?
Yes. So this one's interesting. Right off the bat here, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Human nature does not like to admit fault. When people are criticized or humiliated, they rarely respond well and will often become defensive and resent their critic. To handle people well, we must never criticize, condemn, or complain because it will never result in the behavior we desire. So basically what it is going to result in is it's going to result in that person going on the defensive, right? And we're not going to get anywhere. Everybody knows this. Once somebody's on the defensive and you've got kind of that friction in between you, nothing is going to get accomplished. Like at that point, you really
no.
You've damaged your productivity in the organization. You've damaged the culture. The importance of trust is, we can't overstate the importance of trust. You've damaged that trust, Brian. And then one of the interesting things I found about this in my research, Brian, you should not do this to yourself. Brian cannot criticize Brian too harshly. He can't condemn, these things, these negative thoughts. It also affects you and it'll affect your confidence.
So what you're saying is it's the idea of the positivity is what we're looking for?
I think so, Brian. I really do. So openly, first of all, you definitely should not be criticizing, your superiors, whoever you work for. You shouldn't be complaining openly in front of your subordinates. Those things are already big time no bueno, right? But then you as a person, if you start really overly being like too harsh, darn it, Brian, you could have done X, Y, and Z, and that problem would have been resolved much faster. But now you're damaging your own confidence with those kind of thought patterns and that negativity. So you don't want to let that negativity enter into the equation, not just for you, but for your subordinates as well.
Oh, I completely agree.
Those that work with you.
Yeah, definitely. And when you say that too, so you think about it. We've said it before. Bad news doesn't get better with time. And if you've already been one of those types of people that will criticize, condemn, and complain at somebody when they bring you bad news, do they want to bring you bad news? No. So what do? They'll act like they didn't know, or they'll hide it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so they'll find ways to get around that because no one wants to be in that negative atmosphere. No one, pride kicks in and people don't want to be, yelled at, screamed at, or treated like garbage. However, on the flip side, I do believe there is a time for discipline. There is a time for corrective training. There is a time to discuss what could have happened. But I think that's the whole point is we don't criticize them. Instead, we question, right? We don't condemn. Instead, we come to a common, I guess you'd say, analysis of the situation. And complaining, I've heard it before. I've heard it 100 times, and I'll tell you what, Dave Ramsey talks about it in many of his stuff. He says, don't complain about something that you cannot fix, because that's just griping and that's gossip and stuff like that, and it just creates turmoil. So I do believe that there are times where, let's say Snuffy does something that was completely out of character, was wrong, and he shouldn't have done it type thing. Well, first, I want to know why he did it. He's not going to tell me why if he feels scared. So it's kind of like you got to open up that communication. And I think this is what that does. This opens up communication, my man.
Yeah, I think you're right. It opens up communication. It opens up the old trust tree, right? And really, if somebody does something, maybe not right, maybe not necessarily completely wrong, but you're not really criticizing them if you're on a fact-finding mission to find out why. So when I hear criticize, I kind of hear the, oh, why'd you do this? You did this, this, and this. You're a terrible leader. You can't make a decision. Like openly just, beating them up instead of going to them, instead of criticizing their lack of ability to make a decision. Just say, I noticed that sometimes you tend to hesitate to make a decision. Like, is there something I'm doing that makes you feel like you have to hesitate, or how can we work around this? I think is a much more positive spin on that rather than just criticizing them. And then we're developing people at that point.
Yep, exactly. Well, with the idea of don't criticize, condemn, and complain, then there's the flip side of things. How about why don't you give them honest and sincere appreciation? That to me that's the next side of things. It's almost like, hey, why don't you replace this behavior for that behavior? Which brings us to number 2 of fundamental techniques in handling people. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Appreciation is one of the most powerful tools in the world. People will rarely work at their maximum potential under criticism, but honest appreciation brings out their best. Appreciation, though, is not simply flattery. It must be sincere, meaningful, and with love, right? So, for instance, when I say something to you, like I sent you a message after an episode we just recently did, and I said, hey, man, that was really a good episode. That's because I actually, after recording it, I was like, wow, that was really good. I hope Ed knows it was as good as I felt it was. So why not send him a message letting him know? And then you reply back with, yeah, I really liked it also. I mean, to me, we kind of knew on each side, but we didn't know what each other was thinking. So why not share that?
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I got like an example. So this week I've been really busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. As units are about to come to Europe for their training, things really ramp up, and we're kind of at that mark, 60 to 90 days, and I am swamped at work. And one of my battle buddies calls me up, and they're like, "Hey, do you know this?" And I said, "Hey, I'll get it for you. I just got a few things to do." And they said, "You know what? I'm gonna call, and I'll call you back with the answer." And so they did. And then when they called me back, I said, "Hey, look, I really appreciate you taking that off my back and helping me out with that, because I did. Like, they really helped me." And that's one of the things I did, is not only did I acknowledge it, I acknowledge the specific behavior and that reinforces that appreciation. Like, hey, I really appreciate you calling X, Y, and Z and locking in the travel arrangement with them. It really helped me by letting me do some other stuff. So
yeah.
And that's one of the things I think you want to do. Like when they say honest and sincere, I think you got to name the behavior. I learned that in what's the MRT, Master Resilience Training. Don't just acknowledge a good behavior. Same thing here. Don't just acknowledge what they did and leave it at that. Acknowledge what they did and reinforce it by providing an example. Don't say, hey, I really appreciate your help. My help with what? Because if you're like you as a first sergeant, you're doing 100 things a day. So for the sergeant major to say, hey, First Sergeant Weber, I really appreciate your help with what? Like, pick a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that, and that builds that winning streak. That builds that, and that gives me that boost that, oh man, he really paid attention. I did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think that's crucial when you're talking about giving honest and sincere appreciation.
Oh, I believe so, and with that, so let's say let's take it one more step further. So when I say, hey, thanks for helping out with X, Y, and Z, then you can add a little bit more. It helped with LMNOP, so it allowed us to do this, and this. What that does is not only does it say, hey, thank you, but also it shows that person where their position or what they did affected the bigger picture. So now they feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah, you gave them the why.
Yeah.
Somebody should write a book about the importance of the why. I don't know. But that's what you did. Exactly. You gave them the why. Why was that important that you helped me? Well, we did this, and this. And then I also, through the research, there's a few great ways to give honest and sincere appreciation. And one of them is to catch them in the act of doing it.
Oh, yeah.
When I was a young private, I remember walk in, see a piece of trash, and you pick it up, and the sergeant major's like, come here, private. When you go over there, and as a private sergeant major in the 90s, you're shaking in your boots, like literally shaking in your boots because he called you.
Yeah.
And then the sergeant major said, I appreciate you doing the right thing and picking that trash up.
That's good.
I was like, oh, okay. But he caught me in the act of doing something, and he acknowledged it immediately. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things. And then the other thing through the research I saw, and they give an example in this video I watched, never ever say, hey, First Sergeant Weber, I really appreciate your help with, conducting the soldier readiness preparation training. Thank you very much. Can you run a range for me next week? So never give them the appreciation and then follow it up with another request for work.
Yeah.
You know,
Just end it as that.
because because it makes me, so me as the first sergeant, now I feel like, well, you only acknowledge what I did good to butter me up for this other thing you want me to do.
Yep. Tick for tack. Yep. I know exactly what you mean. Well, I think that what we just discussed there about that, adding on to it and making it so they understand the bigger picture, I think that kind of leads us into number 3. You want to take us into number 3?
Yeah. So number 3, this is also very important. And this one plays very well into the next segment we're going to do, I think. I think it plays right into number 1, actually, Brian. So we should be a good transition here. Arouse in the other person an eager want. To get what we want from another person, we must forget our own perspective and begin to see things from the point of view of others. When we can combine our desires with their wants, they become eager to work with us and we can mutually achieve our objectives. So this, to me, you ever had that soldier, Brian, and you want them to go to the promotion board because you think they'll be great for them and they do not want to go?
Mm-hmm.
You've had that, right?
Oh, yes.
Well, that is the opposite of what we want here. We want that soldier to want to go to the board.
Yep.
And we want to show them how going to the board will help us as an organization and help them.
Yeah.
Because then that makes them eager to want to do that, that promotion board or whatever the thing is in your organization in particular. But you need to figure a way to say, okay, I need X. They want Y. How do we bring X and Y together and get full maximum effort and participation to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this one is.
I like to associate another book that somebody should probably write, something about ownership. I think that would kind of help us out.
That would be a good one.
Yeah. No, but what you said there, though, their desires or our desires and then their wants, if they really want something, they're going to go after it. You just have to nest it. And I've heard that a lot lately from my commander. He's talking about nesting things. I'm like, to me, that's the idea. Is you want to nest those two together so they're actually one thing. They're not two different objectives, right? Because if it's two different objectives, they're going to see it as two tasks. They're going to obviously go for the one that they want first. But if you can bring them together and say, okay, well, you wanted to go to the board, but we need you to do, you want to get promoted, but we need you to go to the board. Do you see how going to the board is going to help you get promoted to achieve this and become that and blah, 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 and it just kind of go through it,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think for me, Brian, this is one I've talked about on a previous episode, my go home list. When I was a young sergeant, I know nothing is more important to a soldier than their time.
Oh, yeah.
And if I can put on the list, here's the things we need to get done as a team today. And when you get them done, you're going home. So I have told them what my goals are. I know they want to go home early. So it makes them eager to get after their task. I have actually found myself in a situation where you come in at 9 and you give them this laundry list and you're like, all right, we won't get out here any earlier than like 15:30. So 3:30, right?
Yeah.
And these soldiers work and they rotate through chow, and at 1300, they're like, all right, we're ready to go. And it's like, ooh, this might be a little too early. I might get chewed out by the platoon sergeant for doing this, but it was my word. So I got to do it and take that, consequence. But sometimes when you get them too eager, they accomplish things way faster than you anticipated.
Yes. You got to make sure you monitor that, Yeah, definitely. So what we just went through there was the 3 fundamental techniques on handling people. And with what Dale was trying to get at is listen, you got to come at relationships a certain way. You can't criticize, condemn, and complain. You really have to be honest, sincere in your appreciations, and you arouse them in a way that they are eager to to want whatever it is they want. Okay, and now we're going to get to is 6 ways to make people like you. And Ed, I tell you right now, when I went through this is where I felt like we were back in Science of Likeability, because it was very similar. But I also like the way Dale puts it in the book. With some of his examples and thoughts on it. We'll start right off the bat with number 1.
Okay.
Become genuinely interested in other people. You can make more friends in 2 months than being interested in them than in 2 years by making them interested in you. The only way to make quality, lasting friendships is to learn to be genuinely interested in them and their interests. You know, Ed, we've said it before. We said when we used to instruct, the soldiers that we were instructing, they want to talk. They want to tell their story. They want to talk about who they are. Even though we know, we're up there instructing, and in many cases, the people that were in front of these soldiers, had anywhere from 7 to 10 to 15 to almost 20 years of service, where our experiences with what we did were obviously higher in knowledge-wise. But at the same time, those soldiers, they had lives that they lived before the Army, and they just want to express their story and their understanding. And that's kind of how we changed the type of learning and went with Kolb's strategy on it. And we used their experiences and how it made them feel to understand what needed to be done. And I really do believe, though, people want to talk about themselves. That's just how it is. The thing is we have to learn to, as you've said it before, shut the mouth, open the ears, and listen.
Yep.
Allow them to talk about themselves as much as possible and learn about them. In Science of Likability, where we're taught, hey, get them talking about the good stuff, and that way, every time you see them, you kind of proposition yourself to kind of make the topic almost like that. Then it's going to get them put in a good mood, and they're going to like being around you. It's not. The goal shouldn't be to manipulate someone, period. It should actually be to get to know people so you can create lasting bonds and relationships, and it turns into a conducive environment. And that's what I get from that, generally interested in other people. I love asking people about them. I sat on, what's funny, Ed, just before I went straight into this quarantine deal that I had to do, which, by the way, I'm not sick. I had to make sure I didn't catch anything. I sat out on the front porch with my next door neighbor because we were allowed to do that. I sat out there, and he's a sergeant major. He's an ops sergeant major, and he brought out his Love Me book because he was going to show me some things because I was asking him questions about sergeant major academy, things like that, just because I like to pick people's brains and their experiences. No, not everybody's experience is the same. He brought out this book, man, and his thing, I'm telling you, I've never seen a Love Me book this big. And those of you who don't know what a Love Me book is, it's basically it's a binder normally you create, and you put all your valuable documents. Some people like to put them in safe. Some people just kind of leave them sitting on the chair. I can tell you, I can see mine right now. It's sitting over on the floor.
Yeah,
by the
mine's
closet.
right here by my foot.
Exactly, right. But we do is we build these books, and it's about our accomplishments and the things we did, and it's kind of like it's a wow factor, I think. And when I sat there and I went through that with him, he was showing me things and he was teaching me some stuff. I generally, Ed, this was one of those moments, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. This is one of those moments where I genuinely felt like it was a mentor-mentee situation. I felt like I was not only getting mentored, I was also being coached on how to go about certain things. And he was telling me, different things. If I were to be selected to go USASMA and all that stuff, like things that you can get involved in to do and all this. And I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. And I was learning, man, and I loved it because all he was doing was telling me about himself. I was generally interested in his story. And you know what, Ed? This is what I think about this. And it's actually kind of clicking right now, is when you're doing that and you are generally interested, you could also at the same time in your mind think to yourself, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder how I can do that. And then you continue asking them questions about it like I was doing. They continue to talk about themselves and they enjoy that and they want to be around you now. But at the same time, you're learning. That's that lifelong learning we talk about all the time, man. I went a little long-winded on that, man. Talk to me.
No, you're good, man. I was sitting here thinking, so in the position I'm in currently, where I am the representative for my command with the different host nations that we receive service from, like allied partners, this is one of the things that I went to a conference, and like, it's so cool because, you meet somebody from Croatia, and you meet somebody from Bosnia, and you meet somebody from Albania, and I have to interact with them. So it's, hey, how are you? Like, how long you been in the military, and different things, and you learn these absolutely cool things about their culture. But then I noticed that the ones that you get to have a discussion with, they come back around on day 2 of the conference just to say good morning to you.
Yeah.
The ones who maybe either you didn't get to or they were kind of like, off and you didn't, y'all didn't get to interact, they don't really like approach you until you've approached them. So it's very standoffish. But for those first few days, I can tell you, I met this colonel from Bosnia, and every morning that guy made he made it a mission to come see me every morning. Hey, good morning. How was your stay? Did you get a coffee? You want to go get a coffee? Like those type of things. And it's so cool. I love this job. I do. I love this job dealing with these other countries.
No,
it's amazing.
You've slowly converted yourself, my friend, from being that introverted, only extrovert around people I know to I like to meet new people, extrovert type thing. I've seen it, man. You've grown over the past few years that we've known each other, man. So
that's crazy at the ripe old age of 40 plus.
40 plus. By the way, you did just have a birthday.
I did have an amazing. I had my favorite type of birthday. It's not going to feed into your extrovert thing, though. My wife said, "Well, where do you want to go eat?" I said, "I'll be honest. I'd rather you just order some food and I sit on this couch and watch that 70s show." And that's what I did for my birthday.
Way to go, Red Foreman. Tell us the next step.
Yeah. Hey, oh man. Listen, don't feed that fire of me and being Red Foreman.
Oh yeah.
Just because nobody's ever been to my house in Europe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't feed into this Red Foreman thing my wife has going. Now, this next one is Counter Red Foreman. And if you're not a fan of that 70s show, or you haven't watched it, you should probably watch it. It's pretty good. There's a little drug use and some questionable comments, but for the most part, it's pretty good.
It was the 70s.
And Red Foreman does not do number 2.
No, he does.
Smile.
And when we say number 2, we mean as in number 2 on the list, right?
On the list. Now I'm doing what number 2 is, which is smile. Happiness does not depend on outside circumstances, but rather on inward attitudes. Smiles are free to give and have an amazing ability to make others feel wonderful. Smile in everything that you do. So I can tell you, it's kind of funny, Brian. There's this major, and he used to be in our G3 section, and then he moved, and he is the aide for our general, our commander, our commanding general. He's the aide, but this is the happiest major I've ever seen in my life. I have never seen this man without a smile, whether it be in a meeting. He could be getting chewed out in a meeting. He still has some hint of a smile on his face. And it's funny because you really feel the positive vibe when he enters a room.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just the power of a smile. I don't tend to smile a lot like that, but I should, because I have wonderful dimples. I should really smile, but I just don't.
Oh my goodness.
But I mean, hey, a smile does have a influence on the attitude in a room. So, and he is just, he's electrifying, man.
And that's the part of it, though. It's almost like the smile brings this aura around a person, like, right, of happiness, and people they'll gravitate towards angry, right? We said it earlier that people get defensive when you criticize. People want to retract from that, but then they see somebody smiles and says hello to them, well, they're going to gravitate to that. And I would definitely tell you, Ed, over the years, obviously changes have been made to make, to become a better person. And one of the things that I have found is I like to greet people. I'm not worried about that whole, people will give you the greeting of the day type stuff. I got it. I know it's a rule we're supposed to do, but you know what? Sometimes I like to greet people first also. And I want to see their reaction to me when I do that, because to me, it's almost, I know if I had daggone well, just as well as I do, back in the day, you didn't have a first R and look at you, smile and say, "Hey, how are you doing today? Have a great day," right?
That meant I did something wrong.
No, if that came out of their mouth, they must have been high. That's all I know. Okay, they're on drugs, right? But to me, I feel like I'm at that point where I'm allowed to do that because I can make that decision and I have that ability and all that. So I make it a point is when I, say, I'll say hello and I'll smile when I say it, and it kind of brings that over. And people don't want to get away from you. And I think I really feel like that's where Dale was getting at, is the smile attracts people to you, and they're not shunned, or they don't, I guarantee you, just test it out. Walk into a room of people you don't know with a frown and act grumpy. See what happens. And then walk into another room of people you don't know at some point with a smile and greet people, everyone. Hello, hi, and see how people react to you. It's way different, man. So,
yeah. Now I will say, let's see. I won't say her name. There was a NCO at the academy that came right when I was leaving, and I was helping and mentoring her because we were the same MOS. I think you'll know who I'm talking about now.
I know exactly what you're talking about. She always had a
Let's call her.
smile.
No, wrong one. Let's call her Sergeant Harley. So Sergeant Harley.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one I'm talking about. She just got the tattoos on the legs.
Yeah. When she smiles, it was good. But when she first got there, she always had this face like somebody had just run over her cat out front. And I got to know her, when she was my student. And I knew that was that's just how she was. But she was really nice and fun to talk to.
Yeah.
And get to know.
Good person, though.
However, my counterpart that taught with me, he had a few run-ins with her because he judged her based off of that lack of a smile, and he made some comments about a negativity that she had. He felt like there was there, but it was because she didn't smile that gave that that impression, but absolutely not.
Yeah.
And if she listens, I'm sure I'll get a message about this. But
I don't know if she listens.
no.
I'll tell her to, though. I'll be like, hey, you may want to check out, we were talking about you on this one. You'll know when we're talking
Great.
about. Yeah. But I think about what you said there, too, though. He approached her in a sense of, hey, you notice that this is a negative vibe, instead of trying to use what I would consider a reflective pattern of smiling, say hello. People tend to want to do it back the same way, and then you create a habit in them, so yeah. All right, so hey, we've only got 4 more to go before we're done with this part, part 1 of this series. The very next one, I'm gonna tell you, Ed, I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna read what it has to say here, and then I'll tell you a little story that just, when I read this, it continuously to click back in my brain about it. But anyways, remember that a person's name is, to that person, the sweetest and most important sound in any language. The average person is more interested in their own name than in all the other names in the world put together. People love their names so much that they will often donate large amounts of money just to have a building named after themselves. We can make people feel extremely valued and important by remembering their name. Take the time to become good at remembering names. All right. So I actually have 3 points. First point is in the Army, the great thing is their name is literally on their shirt. So that's not a hard part to do. But point number 2 is about the pronunciation, learn pronunciation. And I say this because I have a young sergeant that works in my orderly room there for me, but with me actually. And I was butchering the guy's name left and right. All right. I mean, I kept butchering it. And I was trying to say it right, but every time I did, it's almost like I got tongue-tied. See, I just said tongue-tied.
You just did.
But what I'm getting at, so Matsumoto, right? Matsumoto. And no joke, the other day, Ed, he actually corrected me. And I was happy he did, because 1, it showed that he didn't have fear to make a correction, but at the same time that we could have an honest, open conversation and dialogue. So he didn't know this, but I went back into my office and I sat there, and as I was doing stuff, I was saying his name over and over and over again until I knew I had it right. And then later on that day, I came back out of the office and I said his name to him. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I felt better. Third point was, this is a problem I have about with messing up names. Like, it really bothers me to mess up names. And the reason is when I was a private, Ed, I had this sergeant. Actually, I think he became a staff sergeant not long after. But he was not the ideal of what a soldier should be, and it seemed like he kind of got promoted just because he could get promoted, but then they didn't have that rule back then. I didn't respect him, put it that way. So when he continued to use my name incorrectly, and he did it on purpose to make me mad, like that stuck with me through years, man. He used to call me Weber, right? And I hate, like, I even had Joes later on down the road that said, they didn't mean to at first call me. And I was like, no. Hey, listen, I totally understand. You probably don't understand how to pronounce it. Let me tell you how to pronounce it, blah, blah, blah. And then, there's one, Red is his name. And he still likes to mess with me a little bit. He's like, yeah, he'll tell a soldier. He would tell soldiers, hey, just call him Weber. He loves it, but that's one of those things, man, that I can't stand. And I feel what Dale is getting to here. Do you?
I do. And so this is one thing, first of all, to me, I actually used to teach my children all the time. That was one of the ways I taught them to not worry about what other people's impression of them, the whole, well, I'm not popular and all that nonsense, is I would tell them, well, is their last name Haley? Okay, then why are you worried about it? They're not, they're not paying your bills. They're not providing you a job, a place to live, any of this other stuff. So, focus on what's really important. And the thing with the military is we wear our last name on our uniforms. And to me, like,
we do.
Edward, it's got some significance because it was my father's name, my grandfather's name, but not like Haley. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Haley is the name
it does.
that I would absolutely die if I shamed the name Haley, because that's what I think about it. That's what it means to me. So when you're saying somebody's name, and you actually corrected me, I called you Weber one of the first times I met you too. That's a fact. That is a fact.
Yeah.
So, and I usually just go to so I got a young lady, master sergeant I work with now, and she is from, originally from Thailand, and she has a name with a lot of letters that just don't make sense in my mind. And I just, A, Master Sergeant B. I don't even try. And one of the captains I'm kind of close with now, so his name is German, and I didn't know at the time that in Germany you don't pronounce the W, pronounce it as a V. So I was mispronouncing his name for months, and he just didn't say anything about it. He was just too happy-go-lucky about it. And then I figured it out. I had to figure it out on my own, because you're in a meeting and you introduce him, and it's like, oh, that's not his name. And during my research, Brian, I found a couple. Oh, go ahead.
No, what I was going to get to, that you actually care about doing somebody's name right? If let's just say you're writing them an email, right? And you don't know the correct spelling. So you figure out a way to look up their name. And obviously you can just put their whatever email on this, but you look up their name to ensure I did not spell it incorrectly. And to me, that's that attention to detail. And there's times that I've done that, and I used to have a guy, last name Height, right? But it's not spelt like height. There's no E in it. And and when I first got to that organization, that was in Korea, I'm like, wait, is there an E in his name or an I at the beginning? Well, down the road, obviously I learned it, but there's just those things that we as leaders or influencers, we should actually take note on. Am I spelling this correctly? Let me make sure, So you were going to say though?
No. So, I talked about the job I do. And so I'm meeting with people, Dutch, German, French, Greek. And so when I was doing the research for the show, one of the things that really was, if you can guide the conversation or the introduction to let them introduce themselves first, you have to just be ready to look and listen to really hear how they're pronouncing their name, so that you can try to just mimic how they pronounced it. And are you going to be 100% accurate? Maybe not, but you might be close. Some of these countries I've been lucky and I've had very easy names to pronounce, but the French are difficult because they have these accents. And so in the research, that was a tip. Another tip was, so I did this as a kid, but we used it as a way to make fun of people. When you and your friends are together, you make fun of each other's names, right?
Yeah.
So associate their name with something. So let's say, for instance, you're at a business meeting and somebody says, hey, I want to introduce you to, Bruce Schmugatelli. You can associate that with Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And now when you see them,
Yep.
You're like Bruce Wayne. Yes. And then just don't call him Bruce Wayne or just stick with Bruce. But that's another technique for remembering names. You did one with your soldier. Repeat the name several times.
Yeah.
Usually in a conversation, not necessarily a conversation with yourself like you did. But and then form your impression. You know, I don't want to really stroke your ego, Brian, but you know, so hey, this is Brian Weber. That part is sharp. You know, and now I see the part and I associate that with Brian.
Yeah,
because those go together, and hopefully it's you and not, you know, Torres or somebody else.
He had a hard part,
but yes,
though.
Yeah. So these are some techniques that was in the videos that, you know, little quick hit videos I told you I saw online.
Yeah.
During the research, that ways to remember a name, and we always did the, you know, so as a youngster, I was referred to as, my family name was Jamie. So you probably saw this on Facebook for my birthday.
Yeah.
So they would, yeah. So people would tease me because I went by Jamie. They didn't use it to remember my name. They used it to call me Jamie Summers. Do you remember who Jamie Summers is?
Yeah.
The $6 million woman, or the bionic woman, I mean? Yeah. So that's the reason I got rid of that name. And only my family calls it to me, and only the ones I'm afraid of, because the rest of them have stopped. The ones I'm afraid of, they're like, I'm calling you that. And I'm like, okay, you can. Like, I'm 48 years old. I'm afraid of some of my aunts still. But yeah,
hey,
so
that's awesome. You know, you brought up Torres. You know, he's a weekly listener, man. So shout out to Torres.
Is
man.
he?
Thanks for listening. Yeah.
Right. He was a good dude. I was one of the first people he met at the academy.
Yeah. And I think about, so I want to go back to remember names and then pronunciations. So Torres has a bit of an accent, a little bit of an accent. His isn't really that bad, but at the same time, there are some people who have an accent, like you said, like when you talk to the French.
Mm-hmm.
Does it help? Let me ask you this. Does it really help you to read their name and hear them say it? And then, I mean, how do you, because you obviously got to you got to block out that accent too, right?
Yeah, you do. And so what I tend to do, if it's because a lot of these countries, they'll do like a little social before they have a meeting,
right?
And when they introduce themselves, I will honestly say, can I just make sure I'm pronouncing your name right? I don't want to mispronounce your name or that. Sometimes I just humble myself enough to say, hey, I want to make sure I get this right. And a lot of times that's when they'll tell you their first name, so they'll get more, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and that's cool.
Yeah. So if they're captain, whatever, you know, Pierre, not that that's a hard name, they you know, hey, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. They may say, oh, just call me Michel. And I'm like, okay, good enough. Like,
nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
So
that leads me into that next one. You going to go over it then?
Very slick. Yeah. So one of the techniques that we talked about for remembering a name was look and listen. Be prepared to hear the person's name. And number 4 is be a good listener. And listen, Instinctive Influencers, we have done episodes on communication. We have talked about it many, many times. But I do feel that before I read the little blurb, this is one of those things, Brian, that your whole life, you could be a lifelong learner right here in how to be a better listener, a more effective listener. There's little things you could pick up on and learn to do better. So we got encourage others to talk about themselves. The easiest way to become a good conversationalist is to become a good listener. To be a good listener, we must actually care about what people have to say. Many times people don't want an entertaining conversation partner. They just want someone who will listen to them.
Yep.
And I agree. This is a good one. Now, we've talked about, you know, so one thing here, we must actually care about what people have to say. That means put your cell phone in your pocket. Don't fiddle with your Apple Watch. Listen to what they're saying. And so again, with this job that I do, sometimes I'm so fascinated, I'll get lost in their words and be like, oh yeah, we got to go to a meeting. That's right. I'm sorry. Because
you were enjoying the conversation.
Yeah. You're enjoying the back and forth, and it's just funny. You know, how that works. And even when I'm not the most sociable person. It's always been a desire of my wife's for me to get better. And I try here and there, but yeah, you got to listen, because guess what? When I can bring up something out of that conversation tomorrow at coffee, now I have created a little bit of a bond with that person.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
Trust.
yeah. So we talked about before talking to somebody, and then they say, oh yeah, this weekend, we're going to go out to the lake and we're going to go, we're going to go after some catfish. And then on Monday I say, hey, how was the lake? It was pretty good weather, right? Did you catch many catfish out there? Oh man. I can't even tell you how important that is to developing a relationship, Brian. Like the just that factor that, oh my gosh, he really cared about me, going and catching catfish. And this is something that prep the commercial. This is something that the bearded ninja.
Are you the type of man that puts people in headlocks to get them to like you? Or possibly you force them to do push-ups until they can do no more, and then you say, get up, you could be my friend. Well, that's the type of thing that the bearded ninja might do. But the only way you can emulate the lifestyle the bearded ninja holds is with the bearded ninja beard balm, made of snake venom and pomade. Put it right in that beard, nice and luscious. It's just the way to go about life. End of commercial, by the way. I did ask him when he was going to start selling this, and he said, funny.
That's all he said. But this is one of those things. So when I worked for him, I went on leave, or a pass or something, but I went down to Florida, and he's like, oh, how was the boat? Did you have a good time? I was going deep sea fish or whatever. He asked you those follow-on questions when you come back about what you did. Whether he did it intentionally or it was just who he is as a person, really, that's insignificant to me. It's the fact that he asked about my trip,
Yep.
and he asked specific questions, not just, hey, how was Florida? Like, that's very generic. Hey, how was this? And that just builds a relationship, and then now that lets him exercise some influence over me because I know that he cares.
Yeah. Hey, Ed, so I would definitely say there's another edition of this book. You've probably seen it before, but it's how to win friends and influence people in a digital age. All right. And it goes into like the digital side of things. So, and here's where I would spin that a little bit for our modern times. For instance, so let's say you went to Florida and you took pictures and then you put them on Facebook, Instagram, and anything like that. What that does is that creates, to me, a conversation starter to bring up that joyful time. Because if I see a delightful picture of you enjoying yourself swimming with dolphins, then I'll be like, hey man, so what did you think about swimming with the dolphins? Right? You did, when like I approach you saying that, you're gonna be like, whoa, how did you, and I'm not saying like, okay, hold on, let me back up. Don't Facebook stalk people, okay? That's just creepy.
Yeah. At least we should be friends on Facebook if you're going to ask me those questions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
it
should pop up.
Wait a minute.
It should pop up in my feed or something, and then I can talk about it. Right? Yeah. I'm very well. So, and I find it, to me, that would help. That helps us in this digital age. And I had people do it to me, ask me about my hike, because we took pictures up in the North Cheyenne Mountain State Park. And funny thing was, I said, oh, it was great, except for I got this $60 ticket because I parked where I wasn't supposed to. And, yeah, that's that part. But what I'm getting at, though, is like, there's more than one way to, to peel this onion, right? We're going to get to all the layers, but you can take different approaches with different types of people. And that's why I've never felt like it was the right thing to shun like social media in general, and that's why I'm part of all platforms. And it doesn't scare me to hit the send button on a friend request with a soldier that is a junior enlisted within my organization. I'm totally fine with that. That doesn't bother me. Actually, if anything, that makes me happy when they accept it because they feel like whatever they put on there is going to be okay for me to see. And if I see something that shouldn't be, I may bring that up to them also. But I love that. I think that's just another form of the good listener piece, though.
Yeah, no, that's I think it is. You're right. The digital age. I did not know there was an edition of the book out there though, so now I'm gonna have to look for that. Oh man,
Yeah,
this library.
Chris Dyer, he told me about that. He was like, "Hey, you ever looked at this one?" He actually sent it to me. It was years ago, man, and that's when I was like, "Oh, let me check this out." And I think I have it on my computer here. Like I have a PDF of it, but I just never went and got into it. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right. Well, let us move on to the fifth of the five of the six steps, ways to make people like you. Number 5 is talk in terms of the other person's interest. This once again, this is that whole Dr. Phil. It's not about you, type situation. So the royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. If we talk to people about what they are interested in, they will feel valued and value us in return. This goes back to sign selectability.
Excellent.
If you talk about something good, maybe I'll bring it up later on. If I, you love your dog, you love, you're a big fan of Patton, you and your wife love Legos. I would say every time we've ever talked, Ed, somewhere that has come up in our conversation, whether you brought it up or I brought it up, right? Yeah. I know that's to me, that's, obviously you feel comfortable to bring up situations, uncomfortable situations. Do you remember there was a time back when
yeah,
you brought up an uncomfortable situation with family, and I said, hey, just talk to the person, and you did. Obviously things didn't get completely worked out, but at least you probably felt better after it.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was because you were in the trust tree.
Am I no longer in the trust? Am I outside the trust?
Yeah, I did say were. Anyway,
no. That's horrible, man.
No.
So talk in terms of person's interest. What are your take? What's your take on that, my man?
So again, just like many, many, many things we've discussed on this show, talk in terms of the person's interest. How do I know the person's interest? Well, I was a good listener and I became generally interested in that person. And then how can I use this? I hate the word saying use, but how can talking in terms of the other person's interest benefit me as an influencer? Well, it allows me to arouse in that person an eager want.
Yep.
Right?
Build a relationship.
All these things are just tying right in together, because when I understand that, I understand that my soldier is very attached to his religion, and I make sure I afford them that opportunity to attend church. That's a win streak, right? I know we're swamped. Hey, I'll cover down on your amount of work. I'm going to make sure you get to church, whatever it is. And that church just popped in my head because I think of one of my soldiers that actually just raised a bunch of money for veteran suicide out of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if I understand what you're interested in, that's how we can bring things together and build that relationship that's going to enable me to exert my influence. And then the other thing is, when you understand their interests, you can tell them what's in it for them.
Yeah.
When we're doing something, when we're providing a task, right? And I'm going to give them the why, but the why is great, but what's in it for me? And that's where this comes. At least for me, Brian, that's where I think this really comes in, because the payoff is, here is where the value is to you, I think.
Absolutely, man. And like you said, though, because you hit back on like being a good listener, be general. These 6 areas, it's not that they're individual. They're actually, it's points of a whole, right? The whole is to create relationships. Now he says make people like you. I don't even like to think of that, of like, I'm going to make you like me. Instead, it's, I'm going to build a relationship with you, right? And we're possibly going to become friends, or we're going to be positive associates in a sense. No, this is a way to drive that negativity out of relationship.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you just mentioned, and we talked about terms of the other person's interest. How do we do that? Number 6.
Ooh.
That means it's your turn.
Is this me?
Yeah.
It is me. This episode is flowing together so well that I just lost. I was like, hey, is it Brian? Is it me? Who started that one? I don't
You,
know.
me, you, me.
Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. The golden rule is to treat other people how we would like to be treated. We love to feel important, and so does everyone else. People will talk to us for hours if we allow them to talk about themselves. If we can make people feel important in a sincere and appreciative way, then we will win all the friends we could ever dream of. All right. Well, one of the things that I found, so when we do this, right, we make somebody feel important. We make them feel like they're a valued member of the team. This equals more engaged employees. And there are studies out there where more engaged employees are 43% more productive employees. So the more we can make them be engaged by making them feel like what they're doing is important, the more productivity they're going to produce. And I think that my friend, for a organization is crucial. Like 43% more productivity, that is amazing. And how? By doing something so simple as treating somebody like you want to be treated, by listening to them when they talk. Now we talked about not complaining, but if you have somebody and they just need to vent something, maybe there is something frustrating somebody. We talked about some of these things haven't really stood up to the test of time. I understand getting frustrated. So if you're depending on another leg of the organization, another part of the organization, and maybe they're dragging their feet and now it's causing you to miss your timelines, then you're going to be frustrated. But if I let you listen and vent that, I make you feel like I genuinely care and that you're important, then that is going to eventually transition into some more productivity, some better productivity from you as the worker. So I think that's very important, Brian.
Yeah.
And I mean, who doesn't want to feel important? Everybody wants to feel. We want to feel like we're needed in an organization. I know for me, if I go to work in a job and I go home and I feel like I stole money from the government because I was not of value, you know what I mean? I wasn't engaged enough. Like I literally can come home and say, man, I did not do anything that helped my organization. And I feel terrible. And that's not how you build a great influence.
No, not at all. I look at this, Ed, and I think of there's a saying, don't burn bridges. I like to add to that though. Don't burn bridges. Instead, open up more lanes of traffic, right? And to me, when we do this, we're opening up more lanes of traffic. We're creating these networks of people because just here's an idea. If Snuffy becomes aware that I may be a good person and that they generally like me and they want to associate with me, then it doesn't bother Snuffy to introduce me to Joe Bob over here, right? And then Joe Bob will get to learn to know me, and then he wants to introduce me to this. So you think about it, you can create networks in the same phrase of thinking. But that's the whole thing is we went through these 6 steps and they are a lump sum, and I love that idea of people wanting to make other people feel important. I just read something the other day. I think it was yesterday actually. I was doing some research and I just read it was a quote. And I want to say it was either was it Gandhi? No, it wasn't Gandhi. It was something else. I'm going to look it up. But the quote was, if you want to feel important, lift somebody else up. And I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. Put others before ourselves. So, but other than that, Ed, hey, way to go for part 1 of this detailed, I guess you could summary of what Dale Carnegie wrote and how to win friends and influence people. That's what I would call it, an in-depth summary in a sense. But we're still going to have two more episodes to complete the book and the overall summary of it. And so this was part 1. But part 2 is going to deal with the 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking. And then part 3 is going to be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment, which that one is interesting. I've already, obviously went through a lot of this stuff. But with that, man, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, no, I like the way we broke it down, Brian. I think it's pretty cool the way we broke it down. I was just sitting here thinking, and this is not like a big book. You know what I mean? This is not like this big, epic, kind of like the Tools of Titan books by Tim Ferriss or the Tribe of Mentors. It's not a book that thick, but it's just a lot of information. And again, if you read it, you will really appreciate how some of these things are like standing up. Now, again, the examples that Dale Carnegie provides, they're a little dated, but they're still valid. So just I enjoy this book. I'm glad you came up with this idea this week as a way to do this.
Yeah, well, it's so you said it's not a big book. I actually just looked at it because I have a hard copy right here in front of me, and with the index. So we're talking about all the pages before the index and like one little thing about Dale Carnegie training, 292 pages.
Yeah, like
pages. It's just
that's crazy.
Sometimes you gotta be able to sit down and take the time to do what it is you need to read or listen to it. Listen to it just as well. Yeah. So I know an audiobook.
So
they have a great voice.
500 pages of information squeezed into 292.
Well, in a sense, but and you know what I find funny, Ed, before we kind of fade out of this episode is this we just said was done 83 years ago. It still applies today. These are the things we can do to kind of help make society better. And to me, it's like there's a reason why it continues to be the top seller because people are wanting to learn how to become better, right? If it sold that many copies of 250,000 copies in the first 3 months in 1937, and it still does that at least every year now. I mean, come on.
Yep.
You can't tell me it's a good source manual. And that's the way he framed it when I read that, like how to digest this book is use it as a source manual. You learn from it and then go back to it every once in a while to refresh. So other than that, Ed, got anything for the listeners?
I do, Brian. So in between this episode and the next, I would encourage the listeners to check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at 101 Influence. They could also check us out on our individual Twitters. Let's get this thing, I checked on my Twitter a few times this week and I just didn't have enough messages for Instinctive Ed. So I encourage you to get out there, tweet us and tweet Brian, tweet myself, and then check out the Facebook page. It is a group page, but you just answer one little question or a series of questions and submit that. We'll get you approved and into the group. And then check us out on our website, instinctiveinfluencers.com. And so that's a good way for you to link in with us over the next week in between this episode and the next one.
Exactly. And I would definitely tell people, hey, listen, if you want to, here, matter of fact, I'll just give you a little task. If you want to continue on and hear what our thoughts on this book, but you'd also like to learn a little something about the source material, buy it on Kindle, get the audio book through Audible. And to tell you the truth, I think I have it on Audible. If you've never been gifted a book before on Audible, I don't know if you know this out there. If you've never been gifted a book, you can receive one free book from another person. So if you want this book for free or one of the ones we've talked about that we have, let me know and I'll gift it to you. I don't mind. I've you know how many times I've gifted that newest book of Jocko's to people just because I'm like, hey, listen to this. This is great stuff.
It is a good book.
Yeah. So hey, reach out and I'll gift it over to you. If you really want it, just let me know. And but other than that, Ed, thanks for getting on today. It's not as long as like our past few episodes, but that's the whole point. We want to keep all 3 of these episodes short just in case somebody wants to listen to them back to back to back. Because if you think about it, that'll be over 3 hours.
Yeah, that's hey, if you never know, you might have something crazy going on. Like for me lately, I go on these longer bike rides and I throw on a podcast and I'm like, all right, let's roll. And it's just a good way to like kill the time. And so that's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was no joke, man. I was listening to one of our most recent episodes that came out just the other day. I was going through NCORs. I just had it on in the background because I just wanted to listen to some of the stuff we were talking about. But hey, anyways, Other than that, thank you very much for listening. I am Brian.
And I am Ed.
And this is the Instinctive Influencers Podcast. That was part 1 of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Be sure to come back for part 2 and part 3. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.